question is, on a world scale, when is it too late? If we don't act now, it will be too late. And we've been saying that for a long time, and we're saying, well, what do we mean by now? And we've said, well, in the next 10 years or something, and think, 10 years' time, that's a couple of budgets away, and politicians won't do things. We have to do it now.
So now,
mail service delivers
wait a minute, gentlemen, in the final question.
So I go through these thousands of lines of code, and it doesn't really matter. I don't like my job, and I don't think I'm gonna go anymore.
You're just not gonna go?
Yeah.
Won't you get fired?
I don't know. But I really don't like it, and I'm not gonna go.
So you're gonna quit?
Nuh-uh, not really. I'm just gonna stop going.
Carbon dioxide can remain in the atmosphere for centuries. So even though emission rate dipped during lockdowns in 2020, the report confirmed it did not have any discernible impact on the atmospheric levels of greenhouse gases and the growth rates. The report also flagged concerns about the ability of the ocean and land to absorb roughly half of CO2 emissions. These so-called carbon sinks should act as a natural buffer for dramatic temperature increases. But the data collected by WMO over 10 years show that some of these carbon sinks have turned to carbon source for the first time, including the Amazon rainforest.
But remember, the current global energy crisis means it's digging even deeper for coal. But a week before the world descends on Glasgow, can we expect white smoke or simply more dark fumes?
This is code red. The nation and the world are in peril.
And when Biden's climate envoy travelled to China last month to extract more green promises, he came back empty-handed. Any hope of collaboration, never mind a deal, seemingly evaporated. Just like the fumes here in Corpus Christi in Texas. Joe Biden insists the US fossil fuel industry must go green if America is to meet its pledge to cut emissions in half by the end of the decade. This is Refinery Row, a 10-mile stretch on the Gulf Coast of Texas that epitomizes America's addiction to fossil fuels. Oil and gas refineries and petrochemical plants as far as the eye can see.
Texas is not going to do anything to move towards Biden's clean energy plan, okay? It's not going to do it. This expansion here is, if we can't control it, then there is no hope.
From coast to coast, parts of the U.S. on Tuesday took a beating from Mother Nature or tried to recover from her formidable wrath. A so-called bomb cyclone that flooded Northern California over the weekend was strong enough to tip over a tractor-trailer on a bridge just north of San Francisco. In Utah, too, high winds toppled semis on an interstate near Salt Lake City. In the Midwest, a tornado took out homes in the small town of St. Mary, Missouri, and Chicago's Lake Michigan roared with ocean-like waves. New Jersey was under a state of emergency, said Governor Phil Murphy.
The clock is ticking. The emissions gap is the result of a leadership gap, but leaders can still make this a turning point to a greener future instead of a tipping point to climate catastrophe.
As a newly published UN report found that despite international commitments to cut greenhouse gas emissions, the planet is on track for a 2.7 degrees Celsius temperature rise this century, a rise Guterres called catastrophic.
This report is so another thundering wake-up call. How many more do we need? The recent IPCC report already showed that unless we reduce global carbon emissions by 45% from 2010 levels by 2030, 100 months from now, we will not reach a 1.5 degree future.
The report said G20 countries, which represent 80% of global emissions, are not on track to achieve their original or new 2030 pledges. And as extreme weather events like wildfires and floods continue to wreak havoc globally, Guterres said the heat is on leaders to do more.
The heat is on. And as the contents of the report show, the leadership we need is off. And far off. We know that humanity's future depends on keeping global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030. And we also know that so far, parties to the Paris Agreement are utterly failing to keep this target within reach.